This presentation is entitled Death Clearance in Central Cancer Registries. I'm Susan Bolick. I'm Director of the Central Cancer Registry in South Carolina, and today I'm presenting as co-chair of the NACER Death Clearance Work Group. The primary purpose of a central registry, as you all know, is to collect complete, timely, and high-quality data for many purposes including surveillance, cancer control, policy development, and research. One activity designed to assess and improve overall registry completeness and quality is death clearance. What is death clearance? Death clearance is the process of matching registered deaths in a population against reportable conditions in the Central Cancer Registry database for two purposes: in order to achieve ascertainment of death information for cases in the registry and identification of all deaths with a reportable condition mentioned as a cause of death on the death certificate that are not found in the registry database. And the year of deaths should correspond to the incidence year being completed. And we conduct death clearance in order to improve the population-based cancer registration by utilizing information from the death certificates to enhance the data quality and usefulness with death information common to both the cancer and death registration systems, and to improve completeness of adding otherwise unreported cancer cases. So it's a measurement of your case completeness as well. There are several important benefits from conducting death clearance. The results of the process provide information to assess the adequacy of reporting from both your hospital and non-hospital sources. By analyzing the results of death clearance, you can identify deficiencies in case finding from existing case finding sources, as well as identify untapped sources of cancer cases. To provide a little background on death clearance, the death clearance process has evolved over the years, and NACER formed the Death Clearance Work Group to develop guidelines and minimal requirements for death clearance that all must follow, so we'll have consistency and comparability among the death clearance results. So we have in the Death Clearance Manual that was published in 2015, comprehensive yet practical approach to conducting death clearance. The manual includes minimal requirements that all registries must do, best practices for each requirement, guidelines to help get the most from the process, some example scenarios with resolution for practical use, the glossary of terms for consistency and interpretation, plus the historical facts on the evolution of death clearance on getting to this point. So when must death clearance be conducted? It should be completed at least annually, and as far as when it should be done, careful timing should be considered to maximize staff time and minimize the volume of death clearance followback. The mortality file should be closed out, so you must work closely with your vital records area to determine when that occurs and have it available to the registry. And the registry cases should be complete for the diagnosis year that correspond to the year of deaths for death clearance. And if a state has problems with the final mortality file access, a state may choose to conduct death clearance more frequently. Death clearance involves two steps. There's the death clearance match, which is the linkage of the vital records death file to the Central Cancer Registry database. And step 2 is death clearance followback, which is the process to identify any missed cases that should have been reported as an incident case. Step 1 of death clearance is death match. Deaths from the official state, territorial, or provincial mortality file are linked to the registry database to identify 3 categories: records that match, patient matches; records that did not match, patient non-matches; and those records that require manual review that are possible matches. Another death match that can be done that assists with completeness of identifying deaths is the death match to the National Death Index or Statistics Canada. This additional match assists in obtaining death information on patients who no longer live in the registry catchment area and those who resided in the catchment area at the time of death but died in another state or province. Especially helpful if some deaths are not available to the registry. Again, another indication of working closely with vital records to understand exactly what's included in the final mortality file. As we just said, death match results in 3 categories. For the patient matches, those deaths that matched a registry case, the registry case is updated with death or relevant information from the death file to improve completeness and quality of that case. For the patient non-matches, which are the deaths that did not match to a registry case, death clearance follow-back is performed in order to identify any missed incident cases that need to be added to the registry for that year. And the possible matches are those that are resolved through manual review into one of the categories above. So the patient matches have been taken care of by updating death information in the registry database. The patient non-match category involves death clearance follow-back, and that's step 2 of death clearance. So each non-match death must be resolved for death clearance to be considered complete, and it has to be through medical record or clinical source information only. Confirmation of the cancer diagnosis from a medical practitioner and the exact or estimated date of diagnosis is required. The Death Clearance Manual has specifics on acceptable sources for follow-back and guidelines for follow-back. The death certificate is not a clinical source. The initial step in follow-back is to determine the best source for follow-back for the deaths. Review of death certificates, in addition to having access to the electronic death file, can provide additional sources for follow-back, and those include hospitals, nursing homes, and of course the certifying physicians. Hospital registrars are very helpful in providing follow-back information on patients who died at their facilities. We always in South Carolina start with the hospital registrars if we have information that states the patients died in their hospitals. We send them a list with the information we need. They look up that information and provide it back in a timely manner, and that gives us a head start with our follow-back process. Nursing homes are contacted if that's appropriate in your state, and of course certifying physicians are a prime follow-back source, and they are sent forms to complete with the needed information along with the cover letter explaining why we're asking for this information. The follow-back process can be set up electronically, meaning the transfer of the confidential information can be transmitted through your secure web portal, but it's a very time-intensive effort to get it set up. We're talking about thousands of deaths initially and hundreds probably sources that have to be set up with individual accounts in order to transfer the patient information securely. And then the sources, follow-back sources, can change from year to year. New physicians, new data sources can be identified, so someone has to be dedicated to keeping the electronic follow-back process up to date. So all of the letters have been sent and received back at the registry from all of the clinical follow-back sources, and this information on the patient non-matches result in one of 3 categories. A non-reportable case, your clinical information confirm that this is not a reportable case to your registry, and those can be deleted from death clearance. The second category are the missed incident cases, where the confirmation of the cancer diagnosis and the exact or estimated date of diagnosis have been received from your clinical source, and these are now considered cases for your registry, and they must be abstracted into the appropriate year into the database. And the third category are the death certificate only cases, the DCOs, where you did not receive follow-back information to confirm the diagnosis or the date of diagnosis. So all the information that you have on that case is the death certificate. These must be coded according to the specifications in the death clearance manual. And in summary, all missed incident cases and DCOs must be added to the registry database for the specified year. To review, the death certificate only case results when follow-back confirmation of both the diagnosis of cancer and the date of diagnosis cannot be obtained, and the only information about the cancer diagnosis is gleaned from the death certificate. The case is then classified as a DCO case, and these are coded to type of reporting source 7 in order to delineate them in the registry database. Registries have a varying capacity for death clearance follow-back. There are limited resources in some registries where they don't have the staff or the time to follow back on all non-matched deaths. So the question is follow-back on all non-matches required? If a registry chooses not to conduct follow-back on certain non-matches, those patients must be entered as DCO cases in the registry database. They can't be eliminated just because you choose not to follow back on them. Reasons for choosing not to conduct follow-back may include missing information for the follow-back source, invalid address, retiring of the physician, insufficient registry resources, as I mentioned. So a choice can be made not to follow back, but each non-matched death has to be accounted for in your registry database. Part of the death clearance process is to calculate a DCO percentage. DCO cases represent the percentage of cases reported by death certificate only in a specified year. And the DCO percentage can be used as a measure of case completeness. The goal, of course, is to keep DCOs to a minimum. Due to the incomplete information, all you had was the death certificate, and that's very incomplete as far as a cancer abstract goes. And we want to minimize the number of cases that were generated from mortality data as the primary source. So the DCO percentage is an indication of case finding completeness. A high percentage would mean these cases are being missed when they were initially diagnosed, and trying to identify patterns in why these cases were missed is a very worthwhile endeavor. Once the follow-back process has been completed and we have our 3 categories defined, the non-reportable cases have been deleted, the missed incident cases have been added to the registry database, and then we calculate this DCO percentage. And the formula is here. It's the number of DCO cases for the year divided by the total number of incident cases for the year times 100. And the definition of incident cancer cases is defined based on the standard setting organization's definition in the death clearance manual. So depending on who you report to, you would follow their definition of the denominator for the calculation for the DCO percentage. Each standard setting organization also has standards for the DCO percentage requirement after follow-back is completed, and it's part of the NACER certification process, and the gold standard states that DCO percentage shall not exceed 3% of the total incident cases for the year, whereas the silver standard states it shall not exceed 5% of total cases. For SEER registries, the standard states that DCO percentage shall not exceed 1.5% of total cases in a given year. NPCR has the National Data Quality Standard for 24-month data, stating that DCOs shall not exceed 3% of the total cases. The Canadian Council of Cancer Registries states that the green flag shall not exceed 3%, yellow flags shall not exceed 5%. We've discussed that all DCO cases are entered into the registry. They have incomplete information, so the question becomes, do we use these cases or not? DCO cases are of limited value for cancer surveillance projects. There's lots of uncertainty and unconfirmed information because the death certificate was the only source. Generally, they're not used in analytic epidemiologic studies requiring pathology confirmation or other high-quality data item criteria, but they are usually included in descriptive statistics from registries for case completeness purposes, but they're not used for survival analysis. The Death Clearance Manual provides detailed minimum requirements for all steps of the death clearance process. It's a great guide for those who are involved in the death clearance process. Registries may choose to do more than the minimum if they or their standard setters choose, and I'll provide some examples of that on the next slide. However, registries may not choose to do less than the minimum requirements specify, and that's the only way to have consistency and comparability among the registries for death clearance. Here are several examples that are included in the manual for going further than is minimally required. Registries may choose not only to use the underlying cause of death file, which is the requirement for death match, they may choose to also investigate any contributing cancer cause on the death certificate listed from the multiple cause file. So the death match could be done on the multiple cause file as well as the underlying cause file. That's an individual decision. Death match in the manual is required only at the patient level, meaning a death certificate matches a patient in the registry database regardless of the primary site listed on the death certificate or the registry. It's considered a match if the patient matches. However, if resources and time allows, registries may choose to match at the tumor level and follow back if the primary site on the cause of death on the death certificate is different from the registry primary site for that patient, to determine if any other primaries not in the registry need to be added. It's very important to maintain a death clearance tracking system. It's important to track all death match cases, record the outcome of the follow-back activities so each case can have a resolution, use the tracking system to create query letters, generate electronic records, and generate management reports for death clearance process. That's a way to get the most out of the process, and it confirms when the process is complete. Some hints on additional strategies to take. Second letters for follow-back can be sent. Developing a list of unresponsive physicians and contact the ones with the most outstanding cases by phone for a quicker response. Hospices can be added and sent list of cancer patients and referral sources. And we also use the hospital discharge data set in our state, which is another state agency data set, health data set, for additional information for non-matches. But remember, this cannot be used as a clinical source. I can't emphasize enough the importance of working with your Vital Records division Registries should be familiar with the fundamental vital records policies for content and accessibility of the mortality files that they house. For instance, we should know the answers to these questions. What death certificates are included? Are they just the in-state resident deaths? Do they include state resident deaths occurring out of state? Also, are the out-of-state residents who die in the registry state included? Be familiar with their case sharing agreement policy with other states to know how they share cases or deaths back and forth. And also gain access to the Vital Records Coding Manual if you can for the death file data items so you fully understand what's on the death certificate and in the electronic death file. It's important to understand the problems that can occur with death clearance follow-back volume. The delay in a final death file for linkage can be experienced just like with registry delays in closing out files. Vital Records also can experience delays for various reasons. Incomplete death file, missing out-of-state deaths. When another state is having problems with closing out their file, it could affect your state. Delayed cancer reporting from hospitals, again, that would affect closing out your registry database file. Incomplete lab or physician office source reporting, and death certificate coding errors. And it's important to understand that the underlying cause of death is an official cause of death. It cannot be changed. If through the follow-back that we conduct, the code seems to be in error and may be different from the information in the registry, it's our responsibility to contact Vital Records with that information. They may be able to query the certifying physician who signed the death certificate for resolution of that discrepancy. Otherwise, it has to remain the official cause of death. So in conclusion, I'll make these two final points. By reviewing the results of both your missed cases as well as the DCOs, central registries can gain a better understanding of systemic issues that can be addressed operationally or through training to improve the overall case finding and data quality of the central registry. Also, make the Death Clearance Manual your friend. It includes great detail for all the steps required and recommended to get the most from the process. We've just hit the high points in this presentation. Thanks for your attention.